Hi, everyone. This is Heather Medicine Bear with PH 1000 Introduction to Personal Health, Chapter 2 Stress the Constant Challenge. This is a Zoom recording that I will have the link available for you. So let's get it started here. So just make sure that your audio is on so that you can hear me. My video will be turned off for this lecture. I just want to go over a few announcements for week 2. First, I want to start off with week 1, a little bit about week 1 quiz. So we got about half of you done with the quiz. Right now, it's Saturday night. Quiz is not due till tomorrow night, Sunday, August 29th at midnight. I'm seeing most of you did fairly well. I'm seeing it's averaging about 7 to 10 points. There were a couple questions that may not have been very clear that a lot of you missed. So I'm going to go in and reevaluate those questions, especially the one about the environmental factors, because I did notice I didn't go over it much in my lecture, and there really isn't that much about it in the book. It required a little bit of critical thinking, but still, if it was unclear, that's not fair to you. So I'll probably go in and just add that point on and see if there's any other questions that were missed by most of you. So there's no quiz this week for week 2. You just have your discussion and assignment number 1, but material from this chapter will be included in next week's quiz. So you'll be doing chapter 2 and chapter 4 for next week's quiz. So the discussion board posting should be opening tomorrow, Sunday. So it's available for you to go in there and get started. I'd like for you to have your initial discussion posting done by Wednesday. And if you're listening to this lecture on Monday night, I'll have all this in an announcement too. So it'll be about, I want your initial discussion posting to be about 200 words. And you also need to provide 2 responses by Sunday night on the 5th. 100 word each. Try to engage with your classmates. I'll try to get on the discussion board and put my input in on what everyone's talking about too. Assignment number 1 should be open and available to turn in. It's under the week 2 content folder. So make sure you go in there and submit it through Blackboard. Also, I would like you to watch the video that I have the link posted under the week 2 content. It's called Stress, Portrait of a Killer. It's a really great documentary about what we were learning about in this chapter. It might require you to enable your pop-up windows, and sometimes pop-ups through Blackboard don't work on Internet Explorer or Firefox. So you might have to use Google Chrome. If you can't get the link to work, just Google or go on YouTube and look up Stress, Portrait of a Killer, full documentary. It's a Nat Geo documentary, so it's widely available. So this chapter is all about stress. We're going to go over what stress is, the relationships between stress and individual health, common sources of stress, and there's some stress management techniques that we're going to be covering as well. Okay. So there are two different terms described in the textbook. So overall, stress is related to stressors and the stress response. Stressors are actually the situations that trigger physical and emotional reactions. These types of situations could be traffic accidents. So I guess getting stabbed is one. Of course, that'd be a big stressor. Quizzes, tests, public speaking, homework, family problems, all kinds of things. Those are considered stressors. The stress response, however, is actually the physiological, physical, emotional reaction to those stressors. So those physiological responses, which we'll go over in more detail, includes like increased heart rate, sweating, rapid breathing, anxiety, anger, and fear are emotional reactions. So there are the physiological aspect of the stress response is facilitated by the nervous system. The nervous system, of course, consists of the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. And we have two parts of the nervous system, including the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system under the autonomic nervous system. So the endocrine system is also involved in the stress response. And what happens is there are rapid chemical reactions that affect almost every part of the body. And these physiological responses act very quickly and appropriately to stressors. So like I said before, the nervous system consists of the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. And the autonomic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that's not under conscious supervision, which controls the stress response. And under autonomic nervous system is the parasympathetic division, which is in control when you are relaxed, and the sympathetic division, which is activated when your body is stimulated. So the parasympathetic division controls digesting food, storing energy, promoting growth, and the sympathetic division is activated by stress and fear or anger or pain. When you're exercising, that's the sympathetic nervous system at work. So the most important stress response is the fight, flight, or freeze response. It's when chemical messages and actions of sympathetic nerves cause the release of key hormones, triggering physiological changes, which include heart rate accelerations, increased perspiration, and the release of endorphins. Now, this stress response, although helpful in certain situations, is not necessarily the most healthy physiological response for modern day stressors. So we could be getting ready to speak in public, and we'll have some of the same responses that we would if we were being chased by a rabid dog. Our heart rate increases, our perspiration increases, we tense up, and we're ready to go. So that does cause a little bit of a problem when you're overstressed. All those physiological responses can create a cascade of issues until you return to homeostasis, which is the body's response to maintaining a stable internal environment. This is facilitated by the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. So this diagram here, it just gives a kind of detailed overview of all the different parts of your anatomy and their physiological responses. This might not be too clear on this slide, but it is figure 2.1 in your textbook. Okay. Give me a moment. So there are some emotional and behavioral responses to stressors, which actually can vary from person to person, and perceptions and reactions vary greatly dependent on many different factors. And not all stress is necessarily negative. Some stress helps us perform better. Some stress gives us motivation. So effective responses to stress include, sorry about that, planning, talking, laughing, exercising, improving time management. These are called adaptive coping strategies. Ineffective responses, however, are maladaptive coping strategies, which include using drugs and alcohol, becoming frustrated, procrastinating on projects, becoming hostile, overeating. All of those are bad responses to stress. So cognitive appraisal of a potential stressor influences how it's viewed. Psychological responses to stressors are cognitive, but tend to indicate more emotion. Emotional responses such as anxiety, depression, and fear are determined in part by inborn personalities and temperament, but can also be regulated with coping techniques. Like some coping techniques are adaptive, some are maladaptive. Let's see. So personality is a big part of the stress response, and personality is defined as the sum of cognitive, behavioral, and emotional tendencies, and it affects how a person perceives and reacts to stress. There's a term used in the textbook called hardiness, which helps people to deal more effectively with stress. People with this personality trait cope more positively, they're committed to activities and have a sense of inner purpose and an inner locus of control. So there's two types of motivation that are related to stress and health. Stress power motivation is associated with people who are aggressive and argumentative, but they also tend to get sick when their need for power is threatened. Unstressed affiliation motivation is associated with people who are drawn to others, and they actually are known to report less illness. Another important key term is resilience. which is a personality trait associated with the ability to face adversity and recover very quickly from difficulties. Resilient people face adversity by accepting reality and holding the view that life is meaningful. There's a lot of research that indicates you can change some basic elements of your personality and typical behaviors and patterns of thinking using positive stress management techniques. So there are different external factors and internal factors that can affect cognitive and psychological responses to stressors. These include things like our cultural background, gender, experience, and the stress experience as a whole. So I apologize if I have to keep muting my mic. My baby here is kind of pushing into my ribs, making it a little hard to breathe. So breathing a little heavier and trying to speak at the same time. So cultural background, different cultural clashes can be a source of stress. And that's why it's one of the dimensions of health that we learned about in chapter 1, cultural health, or wellness. I'm sorry, not health. It's cultural wellness. So appreciating and accepting different cultural backgrounds can help you when other cultures collide with your own, to be able to maintain a sense of homeostasis, psychological homeostasis. Gender roles, strict adherence to gender roles can limit one's response to stress and itself can be a source of stress. It can also affect a person's perception of a stressor. And there is some research that shows that women do report higher levels of stress than men. Good or bad experience in the past often color how people respond to similar situations in the future. And all these physical, cognitive, emotional, behavioral symptoms of excess negative stress are distinct, but they're also interrelated. So part of this chapter talks about the general adaptation syndrome, and it's what too many refer to as the universal and predictable response pattern to all stressors. The 3 stages of the general adaptation syndrome are triggered by pleasant stressors, eustress, or unpleasant stress and distress. So it starts with the alarm phase, which is the fight, flight, or freeze reaction. It also makes the body very vulnerable by mobilizing it to cope with a crisis. Then there's the resistance stage, which occurs when with continued stress, as the body develops a new level of homeostasis to cope with the added stress. And this also increases resistance to illness. However, there is an exhaustion stage where resources within the body are depleted and leave the body very vulnerable to disease. This happens when you have a stress load that lasts for a very long time. So this little figure 2.4 in your textbook, shows that resistance to injury lowers during the alarm reaction. resistance to injury is enhanced, and with prolonged exposure to repeated stressors, exhaustion sets in, making you much more vulnerable to disease. So the amount of stress in your body is called the allostatic load. It's basically the wear and tear on the body, and it results from long-term exposure to repeated or chronic stress. It depends on many factors, how heavy this allostatic load can be, includes genetics, life experiences, and emotional and behavioral response to stressors. Although physical stress can promote new levels of homeostasis, there's also many negative effects, like the susceptibility to disease. So these figures just show cognitive symptoms, behavioral symptoms, emotional symptoms, and physical symptoms of stress. We went over some of the physical symptoms of stress, including illness, gastrointestinal problems, headaches, fatigue, high blood pressure, sweating, pounding the heart. So cognitive symptoms include confusion, inability to concentrate, trouble remembering things, negative thinking, worrying, poor judgment. Emotional symptoms include anxiety, depression, edginess, hypervigilance, impulsiveness, irritability, and there are behavioral symptoms such as sexual problems, social isolation, disrupted eating and sleeping habits, irritability, problems communicating, increased use of drugs and alcohol, and crying is there at the bottom. Sorry, he's really up there in my ribs right now, my baby. So some of the links between stress and disease or disorder include cardiovascular disease. So because your blood pressure rises during the stress response, chronic high blood pressure can lead to atherosclerosis, which is a major component in cardiovascular disease. Emotional responses that include anger and hostility are also especially harmful, and atherosclerosis can lead to chronic and heart attacks and strokes. Psychological and mental health problems can affect your judgment, ability to think clearly, can cause anxiety and depression, panic attacks, and one of the more terrible mental health problems that are experienced by many people that go under experience traumatic stress triggers are post-traumatic stress disorder. So health problems, we went over these in the last couple of slides. Altered functioning of the immune system, digestive problems, headaches, insomnia, injuries, menstrual irregularities, impotence, pregnancy complications, cognitive dysfunction. So stress can really take its toll on people. So we have common sources of stress include major life changes, daily hassles like traffic or your boss being on your back, or you have college stressors a lot of you face, like academic, interpersonal, time, financial concerns, worries about your future, job-related stressors, burnout, social stressors, bullying, making friends, dealing with friendships, dealing with other people's stress, all of the above. And of course, environmental and internal stress as well. So some of the ways to manage stress that the book has listed includes having good social support, being able to communicate what you're feeling, assertive communication skills, help people respect the rights of others and protect your own rights, that can help set your stressful situations from getting out of control. Oftentimes, suppressing feelings or expressing feelings aggressively can lead to a lot of problems with social relationships. Exercise is really important and helpful because it helps with stimulating bodily cells, and it reduces some negative physiological effects of stress by allowing yourself to expend the nervous energy that you have from daily stressors, and also training the body to return to homeostasis more readily after stressful situation. And for nutrition, a healthy diet provides energy stores that can be used during stressful situation and improves feelings of self-control and self-esteem. Limiting and avoiding caffeine can also help with stress management and not overeating. Sleep is another important aspect of managing stress. Well, it restores your body when you sleep. It makes you feel rested and ready for the next day. We're going to go over sleep next week in chapter 4. So a big part of the stress management tools in this chapter is time management, especially for those of you and those of us in college and with family things. So they say to set priorities, schedule tasks for peak efficiency. So if you work better in the morning, schedule your most important work in the morning, set realistic goals, budget enough time, break up long-term goals, visualize achievement, keep track of tasks, do your least favorite tasks first. It's whatever really works for you. Consolidate tasks, delegate responsibility, say no when necessary, and give yourself a break. Just do it sometimes, even if you don't want to. Saying no is important because in your professional life and your personal life, you might be asked a lot from people. They might want you available to them whenever they need you, but you can't always, you have to put yourself first sometimes to help manage your stress and keep healthy. So cognitive techniques spoke about in the book include thinking and acting constructively, taking control, problem solving, being present, staying positive, having a good sense of humor, and focusing on what is important. And of course, there are relaxation techniques that help bring you back to homeostasis, including meditation, yoga, tai chi, listening to calm music, deep breathing. And there's a link for progressive muscle relaxation that you can check out. So adaptive coping strategies that we mentioned earlier include active coping, planning, acceptance, positive reframing, emotional support, instrumental support, and humor. And maladaptive coping strategies, which are important to recognize if you begin to see yourself spiraling, include self-distraction, self-blame, venting, behavioral disengagement, denial, and substance abuse. So I just listed a couple of resources for students at HBU dealing with stress. We have our student activities and campus rec and our health services and counseling linked here. If you ever need help, you can go ahead and check that out. And that was chapter 2. So I will keep monitoring how you're doing on the quizzes, and make adjustments if you guys need more time or the questions aren't fitting the lectures. But all of the questions are, as stated in the syllabus, from the lecture, slides, and the reading. So even though I may not go over absolutely everything from the textbook, there still may be questions on the quizzes and exams from the text. So that is all I have for you right now. So I can stop this recording right now. And I hope you all have a good night. Remember, you can email me or call me. I should be available. This week, you might have to give me a little extra time because, like I said, my baby is due. So, yep, email me if you have any problems. Have a good day or night.